That morning, the New York sky was high and impossibly clear, as if pain had never touched the rooftops beneath it. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of Sienna Blake's penthouse, spilling amber across the polished wood floors. The air was laced with the faint scent of drying oil paint and peppermint tea, both lingering beside an untouched canvas. Everything was still, quiet, orderly, as if her life had not just come undone until she saw it. An ivory envelope lay quietly among the morning mail, delicate and refined, standing out between bills, gallery invitations, and art magazines. Embossed silver lettering curled softly across its surface like a secret. And yet, as Sienna's eyes flicked to the names printed in fine script at the corner, every sound inside her went silent. Elliot Hart and Maya Ellis. She didn't have to open it. Their names, side by side, were enough. Enough to halt her breath. Enough to shatter something that had taken 4 years to build. Elliot, the man who once whispered that life without her was unimaginable. Maya, her closest friend, the one who had held her through heartbreaks, sat with her during gallery nights, wept with her when her first piece was sold in Chelsea. Now, they were getting married. To each other. Sienna sank into her chair. The invitation slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor without a sound. Sunlight kept pouring in through the windows, indifferent, but something inside her had collapsed. Her phone buzzed, again and again, messages she didn't dare open. The city had probably heard the news before she had, and as always, she was the last to know. Without a tear, without a sigh, she reached for the intercom. "Clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks." "But Miss Blake, the Caldwell Gallery." "Don't make me say it again." She picked up the envelope, crushed it slowly in her hand, the same hand that had once created beauty, and tossed it in the trash. 4 years of faith. One name, one morning, that was all it took. Sienna left New York the next morning, long before the sun had risen above the skyline. The city was still half asleep, but she couldn't stay another night. She booked a flight to Miami just hours after tossing the wedding invitation in the trash. A spontaneous decision, unplanned, unjustified. She told no one, left no note, didn't post a cryptic update like she might have in the past. She simply vanished. On the flight, she stared out the window as if somewhere beyond the clouds, a way out might appear. But all she found was a widening ache in her chest, the kind that doesn't scream, only sinks. Everything that once defined her, the relationship, the friendship, the carefully curated career, had fractured. The pieces hadn't even hit the ground yet. Miami met her with heat and salt, thick, heavy air that wrapped around her like a dare. Unlike New York, where everything obeyed order and expectation, this city thrived in impulse. It didn't ask why you came, it only asked how long you planned to stay, lost. She checked into a beachfront hotel she'd never heard of before, picked the most luxurious suite available without even blinking at the price. It was far too expensive for a getaway, but for a heart freshly torn open, it was a small price to pay to disappear. That night, the wind off the ocean was warm and wild, like the pulse of the city itself. Sienna leaned softly against the rooftop bar's railing, a chilled cocktail in hand, her eyes tracing the golden glow of Ocean Drive below. This city was nothing like New York. It didn't demand strength. It only required the nerve to stay. She wore a black dress that clung just enough to remind her she still had a body. Still existed. Around her, music played low and smooth, laughter drifted between clinking glasses and fleeting touches. But Sienna stood apart, a quiet shadow in a world too loud to notice silence. And yet, someone noticed. She felt the weight of his gaze before she saw him, a man seated alone at the far corner of the bar, where the light was softer. Dark suit, calm presence. There was something about the way he watched the room, not to consume it but to understand it. When their eyes met, neither looked away. He stood and approached, unhurried, deliberate. There was no arrogance in his stride, only intention, the kind that made time pause just a little. "Is this seat taken?" His voice was low, slightly rough, edged with an accent she couldn't quite place. "Depends," Sienna replied, lips curving faintly. "Are you escaping something or searching for something?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Then he smiled, and with it, the air between them shifted. Is there a difference? They didn't speak for a moment. The wind moved through them, carrying salt and something unnamed, and Sienna, for reasons she couldn't name, didn't walk away. They sat side by side for what felt like hours, time stretching not in minutes, but in the pauses between two strangers slowly seeing each other more clearly. Sienna's second cocktail was half gone when she turned to him, eyes glinting with a vague sort of mischief. "Do you want to get married?" she asked, half laughing. It was meant as a joke, a way to spit out the bitterness, or maybe just to hear her own voice say something reckless. Damien didn't answer right away. He studied her, long enough to make her uneasy, then said calmly, "Yes." Sienna laughed, dry and sharp, her voice cutting through the hum of music and sea breeze. "I was joking." "I wasn't." That stopped her cold. There was something in his tone, not madness, not arrogance, but a kind of terrifying sincerity. "You don't even know my name." "Then tell me," Damien said, eyes still locked on hers. Neither of them moved, neither of them ran. Instead, they started talking, really talking. She told him about Elliot and Maya. He told her about business deals sealed over champagne, a family legacy carved in steel and silence, and the kind of engagement that felt more like a transaction than a promise. The wind picked up, tousling her hair, but in his eyes, she looked like something too real to look away from. "You're insane," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but you're still here, with me." An hour later, they stood inside a small beachside chapel. Neon lights flickered overhead. The officiant looked like he'd done this 100 times. Drunk lovers, desperate runaways, but for Sienna, this wasn't chaos. This was the first time in years she'd done something not for logic, but for her heart. Sienna woke to soft, muted light slipping through the cream-colored curtains. The air was tinged with the salt of the ocean, blended with a subtle trace of unfamiliar cologne that still clung to the sheets. She turned slowly, her fingers brushing across the cool satin, a lingering echo of last night. A simple silver ring sat quietly on her left ring finger. From the bathroom, the sound of running water drifted out. Damien was still there. She sat up, wrapping the blanket around her, eyes scanning the room, and only then did she truly notice. This wasn't just another hotel suite. The painting on the wall was an original Boscott. The watch on the nightstand was a vintage Vacheron Constantin. A leather travel bag bore the unmistakable Ferragamo insignia. The suit he'd worn the night before, clearly bespoke. The bathroom door opened. Damien stepped out in a towel, his hair damp, a quiet smile on his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Thorne," he said gently. Sienna stared at him, suspicion creeping in. "Who are you, really?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up a nearby iPad, already glowing with alerts. "You might want to read this." On the screen, a headline blazed. "Mystery Tech CEO marries unknown artist in midnight Miami wedding." Below it, a photo of them exchanging rings under neon lights. She was laughing. He was looking at her like nothing else existed. Sienna froze. "CEO. Damien Thorne," he said, sitting beside her. "Founder of Thorne Tech, only son of the Thorne Group." His voice was calm. "I didn't lie. I just didn't want that to be the first thing you saw." She didn't respond. Her eyes stayed on the screen. The news was everywhere. Social media was on fire. The world was talking about them. About a wedding no one expected. About her, the woman who had just married one of the most powerful men in America. The flight back to New York was quiet, but nothing about it was ordinary. Damien had arranged his private Gulfstream, every detail handled with discreet precision. Sienna gazed out the plane's window as the city unfolded beneath the fading afternoon sky. Familiar streets, familiar skyline. But this time she was returning not as a heartbroken artist, but as Damien Thorne's wife. His family was waiting at Thorne Tower, the tallest of all their real estate holdings. She had braced herself for a cold, intimidating mother-in-law, someone polished and piercing, but Eleanor Thorne surprised her. The woman approached with grace, took Sienna's hands gently, and said with a voice smooth as silk, "Welcome to the family." There was no scrutiny in her gaze, no judgment, just a calm sincerity, something Sienna had stopped expecting from people with wealth and power. Damien brought her to their private penthouse, a glass-walled masterpiece overlooking all of Manhattan. On the walls, reprints of her early works. In the sunlit corner, a fully equipped studio. Canvases, easels, even the specific brushes she favored. Everything perfectly in place, as if someone had been waiting for her all along. And then came the most shocking part. The exhibition she had canceled in despair was not only reinstated, it was now the most anticipated art event of the year. Her name appeared on every major art magazine. Collectors from across the East Coast scrambled for invitations. Galleries that once ignored her now called in desperation. She hadn't just come back. She had returned reborn. She didn't know what awaited her next, but as she stood in her own studio, bathed in the soft amber of the setting sun, one thing was certain. This time, she wouldn't just survive, she would shine. News of Sienna's triumphant return spread fast through New York's art world. Her newest paintings, vibrant, daring, emotionally raw, were hailed as the miraculous resurgence of a soul once shattered. And then the path knocked. One afternoon, while she was reviewing final details for her exhibition's opening, the gallery manager entered with a conflicted look. "There are two people waiting for you in the lounge." "Who?" "Elliot Hart and Maya Ellis." Their names hung in the air like storm clouds, ready to break. Sienna walked in with a calmness that surprised even her. Elliot stood up immediately, his hair still perfect, but his eyes lacking the certainty they once carried. Maya gave a tentative smile that faltered before it reached her lips. "You look different," Elliot said first. "I am different," Sienna replied, her tone quiet but steady. "They said they came to congratulate her, or maybe to ask forgiveness, perhaps both." Elliot spoke vaguely about not expecting her to bounce back so quickly. Maya mumbled something about never meaning to hurt anyone. Sienna listened. She didn't interrupt. But when they finished, she simply smiled, soft and composed. "Thank you for coming, but I don't reserve space in my life for people who only return when the lights come back on." She rose, gave them a polite nod, and turned away, the door closed behind her, and with it, a chapter she no longer needed. For the first time, she felt weightless. No anger, no vengeance, only freedom. The glass building shimmered like a giant diamond in the heart of Manhattan. Sienna Blake's solo exhibition wasn't just an art event. It was the declaration of a woman who had walked through fire and returned whole. The main hall buzzed with collectors, curators, critics. Everywhere, soft murmurs of awe followed each canvas. These weren't fragments of pain anymore. They were blueprints of resurrection. And then they appeared. Elliot and Maya hovered by the glass doors, unsure, out of place. No one noticed them, not really. Tonight's light didn't reach them anymore. The final piece of the exhibition stood alone at the end of the gallery. Its title, Ashes, a phoenix rising from ruin, wings aflame, gaze unflinching, magnificent. The room fell into reverent silence. No explanation was needed. After the celebration, Damien led Sienna to the rooftop. The city stretched below them, aglow like a man-made galaxy. He wrapped an arm around her waist and leaned in. "I bought the building where Elliot's firm operates," he said quietly. "They'll be relocating next week." Sienna smiled, not with triumph, not for revenge. She smiled because they no longer held power over her. Elliot and Maya could stand in any room, speak any apology, but they couldn't reach her anymore. She had risen beyond them. She had burned down the past, and from its ashes, she had become flame. That day, the city seemed gentler. The sky stretched out in a shade of quiet blue, and the breeze that swept across the penthouse balcony carried the soft scent of white chrysanthemums. Damien's quiet morning ritual. Sienna sat in her studio, brush gliding gently over the canvas in front of her. But this time, she wasn't painting pain. She wasn't painting memory. She was painting light, the kind that feels like breath, like joy too new to be named. After a while, she set the brush down and pressed her hand to her belly. Inside, life was growing, quietly, steadily, just like she once had, learning to exist in silence. When Damien returned home, he didn't speak. He simply walked to her, knelt before her, and placed his hand where her heart seemed to beat strongest now. "I don't need to know what the future holds," he said softly, eyes fixed on hers. "I just need you to know you won't walk alone anymore." Sienna smiled. No tears, no theatrics, just a smile as quiet as wind rippling across still water. She had once lost everything, been left in the middle of her own life, but now, looking at this man, the one who chose her when she was most lost, she knew she had found home. Below them, the city kept spinning, fast, loud, relentless, but up here, in the quiet space they had carved out, built with love, layered with scars healed and stories shared, everything was at peace. No Elliot, no Maya, no borrowed dreams. Just her, Sienna Blake, and a new life blooming inside her. Not to prove anything, just because she finally knew she was worthy. She closed her eyes and pressed her hand to her belly, letting the stillness hold her. Whatever tomorrow brought, it would be theirs, hers, and the little heartbeat growing quietly within her. The city would keep spinning, but for now, peace had a name: Sienna. 2 years later, the sun-drenched penthouse often echoed with the sound of giggles. Sienna sat on the studio floor, hands full with her twin daughters Anna and Alara, who were busy doodling over her unfinished canvas. Damien walked in, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa and a look of surrender. "I've tried putting them to bed 3 times, he sighed. "They're your daughters," Sienna laughed, kissing his cheek as she took the cup. On the walls, her new paintings were taking shape, no longer blazing phoenixes, but softer tones, flowers, sunlight, and tiny hands. Their days weren't perfect, but they were whole. Peace didn't come in silence. It came in messy mornings and sleepy calls of Mama and Daddy. And sometimes, when the city lights flickered on outside, Sienna stood by the window, watching Damien cradle both girls in his arms, and whispered to herself. From ashes, she hadn't just survived. She had bloomed.